The stars outside the window of the SS Horizon gleamed brightly as the young alien students leaned closer to the glass. They were traveling to the farthest edge of the galaxy, a place their professor had described as mysterious, dangerous, and utterly unique. The students, all from different planets, whispered excitedly amongst themselves, their scales, fur, and other alien features shimmering under the soft light of the spacecraft. At the front of the ship stood Professor Ulvex, a tall Zargonian with silver-gray skin and a pair of glowing blue eyes. He was known for his calm demeanor and endless knowledge about the galaxy's strangest places. Today, however, there was something different about him. His tone was more serious, and his usual smile was absent. "Listen carefully," he began, his deep voice commanding silence across the room. "We are about to arrive at a planet unlike any other. It is called Earth." At the mention of the name, a ripple of confusion spread through the group. Earth. That small blue planet on the edge of galactic maps. Many of them had barely heard of it. Those who had, like the daring student Colin, considered it a backwater world of little importance. Colin raised a clawed hand. "Professor, why would we visit such a primitive planet? What could we possibly learn from it?" Professor Ulvex turned to Colin, his glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "Primitive, perhaps. But let me ask you this. Do you know why Earth is classified as a death world?" The students exchanged puzzled looks. No one answered. "Because," Ulvex continued, "it is one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Its environment is hostile, its creatures are resilient, and its inhabitants—" He paused, letting the tension build. "The humans are the deadliest of all." A hush fell over the room. The students' earlier excitement turned into unease. The idea of a planet earning the title of Death World intrigued them, but it also sent a shiver through their spines. "Humans," a timid student named Rylix whispered. "But aren't they extinct?" Professor Ulvex's expression didn't change. "No one knows for sure. Hundreds of years ago, the galaxy attempted to conquer Earth. Every fleet that landed there disappeared without a trace. Since then, no one has dared to return. Until now." The students leaned in, captivated by his words. Even Callan seemed less confident, his earlier bravado replaced by curiosity. Moments later, the ship's intercom crackled. "Approaching Earth. Estimated landing time, 10 minutes." The students hurried to their seats, strapping themselves in as the ship began its descent. Through the windows, they caught their first glimpse of Earth, a lush green world covered in swirling clouds. It was beautiful, almost serene, but there was something unsettling about it. As the ship entered the atmosphere, turbulence shook the cabin. The students gripped their seats, some letting out startled cries. Outside, the blue sky gave way to a dense, overgrown forest. The professor's voice cut through the noise. "Remember," he said firmly, "Earth may look peaceful, but appearances can be deceiving. Stay close, follow my instructions, and do not wander off. This planet is not forgiving." The ship landed with a soft thud in a clearing surrounded by towering trees. As the hatch opened, the students hesitated, staring into the dense jungle. The air smelled rich and unfamiliar, filled with the sounds of chirping insects and rustling leaves. Kalen was the first to step out, his scales glinting in the sunlight. He sniffed the air and turned back to the group. "It's just a forest," he said dismissively. "Nothing special." But as the others followed, they began to notice strange details. The trees were enormous, their bark scarred with claw marks far larger than anything they'd seen before. The ground was littered with strange, twisted plants that seemed to move slightly, as if alive. "Over here," one student called, pointing to a strange object buried in the dirt. It was metallic and rusted, with markings that resembled human writing. The professor walked over, his expression darkening as he examined it. "This," he said softly, "is a fragment of a galactic warship, one of the fleets that tried to conquer Earth." The students stepped back, suddenly uneasy. If even their advanced ships had failed here, What chance did they have? A faint sound interrupted their thoughts. It was distant at first, almost like a whisper, but it grew louder and more distinct. It sounded like laughter. The group froze. Callan turned in the direction of the sound, his claws flexing. Did anyone else hear that? Before anyone could answer, a small object embedded in the ground nearby began to hum. Lights flickered on its surface, and a hologram sprang to life. It was a human figure, clad in ancient battle armor, with a grim expression. "Welcome, brave visitors," the hologram said, its voice calm but eerie. "Let's see if you survive." The students stared in stunned silence as the hologram flickered out, leaving only the rustling of the forest and the distant sound of laughter. The students stood frozen, their gazes locked on the spot where the hologram had flickered into silence. The humans' parting words hung in the air like a warning etched into their very souls. "Let's see if you survive." Callan broke the silence, his voice more defensive than confident. "It's just an old recording. Probably some primitive scare tactic." But the way his tail flicked nervously betrayed his unease. Professor Ulvek stepped forward, his eyes scanning the surroundings. His posture was calm, but his antennae twitched slightly, a subtle tell that even he wasn't at ease. "This is no ordinary scare tactic. That recording activated for a reason. Earth's defense mechanisms may still be operational." "Defense mechanisms," Relic squeaked, her voice trembling. "But humans are gone, right? There's no one left to control them." Ulvex turned to her, his expression grave. "That's what we're here to confirm. History tells us that humans vanished centuries ago, but their creations remain. And if they're anything like their creators—" He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We must tread carefully." The group moved cautiously through the forest, their senses on high alert. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs felt like a potential threat. The air was thick with tension, and the jungle seemed alive, watching their every move. As they ventured deeper, they came across more remnants of human technology: rusted metal structures, shattered drones, and overgrown machinery. Each artifact told a story of the civilization that had thrived in adversity, turning even the harshest conditions into opportunities for innovation. One student, a sharp-eyed reptilian named Tuvok, crouched beside a cluster of vines covering what appeared to be a control panel. With a flick of his claw, he peeled the vines away, revealing a screen that flickered to life at his touch. The screen displayed a map, and at its center was a glowing red dot labeled Restricted Zone. The map was littered with warning symbols, and beneath the display was a line of text in human script. "What does it say?" Rylix asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Professor Ulvex stepped closer, his glowing eyes narrowing as he deciphered the text. "It says, 'Proceed at your own peril. Unauthorized access will result in termination.'" The students exchanged nervous glances. Callan crossed his arms, forcing a smirk. More human dramatics. They always did have a flair for the theatrical. But before anyone could respond, a loud thud echoed through the forest. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the group instinctively huddled together. "What was that?" Tuvok hissed, his scales bristling. Professor Ulvex held up a hand for silence, his eyes scanning the treetops. The sound came again, louder this time, accompanied by a deep guttural growl. Out of the shadows stepped a creature unlike anything the students had ever seen. It was massive, its body covered in thick, jagged fur, and its glowing yellow eyes locked onto the group with predatory intent. "Is that a human creation?" Relic stammered, backing away. "No," Ulvex said quietly, his voice laced with both awe and caution. "That's a native predator, one of Earth's many apex species." The creature snarled, its muscles tensing as it prepared to charge. The students scrambled, their instincts screaming at them to run, but Professor Ulvex stood his ground. "Don't move," he commanded. "It's testing us. Any sudden movements will provoke an attack. The students froze, their breaths shallow as the creature circled them, its eyes gleaming with intelligence. It was as if it understood their fear, savoring it. Callan, unable to contain his bravado, took a small step forward. We can't just stand here. If it attacks, we... Before he could finish, the creature let out an ear-piercing roar and lunged. The group scattered, their panic overriding Ulvex's orders. The forest erupted into chaos as the students dodged and weaved through the trees, the predator hot on their heels. Callan, now regretting his defiance, sprinted ahead, his claws digging into the dirt for traction. Over here. Ulvex's voice cut through the commotion. He was standing near a large metallic structure half buried in the ground. The entrance was open, its interior glowing faintly. One by one, the students dove inside, the creature's roars growing fainter as the door sealed behind them. They collapsed onto the cold metal floor, their chests heaving as they caught their breath. What was that thing? Rylix gasped, clutching her chest. An earth predator, Ulvex said, his tone calm but firm. And a reminder that this planet is not to be underestimated. The group looked around the room, their fear slowly giving way to curiosity. The walls were lined with human technology, screens, consoles, and strange devices that hummed softly. This must have been some sort of control center, Tivok said, his claws brushing against a panel. Callan, still shaken but trying to regain his composure, scoffed. A control center for what? This place is abandoned. As if in response, the room suddenly came alive. Screens lit up, and a synthesized voice echoed through the chamber. Welcome to Earth's Defense Command. You are unauthorized personnel. Identify yourselves or face consequences. The students froze, their earlier relief replaced by a new wave of dread. The metallic voice reverberated through the chamber, cold and unfeeling. The students exchanged panicked glances, unsure of what to do. Identify yourselves or face consequences, the voice repeated, its tone sharper this time. Professor Ulvex stepped forward, his usual composure cracking just slightly. We are researchers from the Galactic Academy. Our intent is peaceful. We mean no harm. There was a brief silence, and then the voice replied, Access denied. You are trespassers on restricted grounds. Leave immediately or face termination. Termination, Relix whispered, her scales pale with fear. They can't mean that literally, can they? The lights in the chamber dimmed, and a low hum filled the air. Suddenly, the walls began to shift, revealing hidden compartments. From these compartments emerged hovering drones, each armed with what appeared to be plasma cannons. They mean it, Tivok muttered, backing up against the wall. Stay calm, Ulvex commanded, though his own voice betrayed a hint of tension. Drones like these are programmed to respond to behavior. If we show no aggression, they may stand down. Callan, still nursing his bruised ego from their earlier encounter with the predator, wasn't convinced. Or they'll fry us regardless. We can't just stand here and hope. As if to prove his point, one of the drones fired a warning shot, the plasma bolt scorching the floor mere inches from Callan's feet. He yelped and jumped back, his bravado crumbling. We don't have time for arguments, Ulvex snapped. He gestured to the console at the center of the room. There must be a way to shut them down. We need to find it. Fast. Tivok and Relix scrambled to the console, their claws skimming over the strange symbols etched into its surface. These markings, they look like ancient human script, Tivok said, but I can't make sense of them. Relix's eyes darted over the symbols, her natural talent for pattern recognition kicking in. Wait, this one here. It's repeated on several panels. It might be a command function. She pressed the symbol tentatively, and the hum of the drones faltered. The lights flickered, and for a moment, it seemed as though they had succeeded. But then the voice returned, colder than before. Unauthorized tampering detected. Defense protocols escalating. The drones began to close in, their weapons glowing ominously. The students were trapped, their attempts to deactivate the system only making things worse. "It's no use," Colin shouted. "We're done for." But Ulvex wasn't ready to give up. His keen eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. His gaze landed on a small, flickering screen in the corner. Unlike the others, this one displayed a looping message in human script. "I need a closer look at that screen," he said, moving toward it cautiously. The drones swiveled to track his movement, their weapons locking onto him. "Don't shoot." Rylix called out instinctively, as if the machines could be reasoned with. Ulvex reached the screen and studied the message. His antennae twitched as he read the words aloud. "Emergency override code required. Input sequence to disable defenses. Override code." Tuvok asked, his voice tinged with desperation. "How are we supposed to know that?" Ulvex turned to the students, his expression stern. "Humans thrived on logic and patterns. If this system has a code, it's likely something symbolic, something meaningful to them." Rylix, still at the main console, suddenly perked up. "Wait. The recording we saw earlier, it mentioned something about survival. Maybe it's related to that." "Survival," Ulvex murmured, his mind racing. He glanced back at the screen, where a keypad had appeared, displaying symbols and numbers. Humans often associated survival with their homeworld's history. Perhaps the code relates to Earth itself. Tuvok frowned. "You're guessing. Do you have a better idea?" Ulvex shot back. The drones drew closer, their plasma cannons charging. Time was running out. Ulvex's claw hovered over the keypad as he tried to piece together the puzzle. Finally, he entered a sequence. 420. A number he had seen etched on one of the earlier relics they'd passed in the forest. The screen blinked, then turned green. Override accepted. Defense systems deactivated. The drones powered down, their weapons retracting as they floated back into their compartments. The hum in the room faded, leaving behind a heavy silence. The students collapsed with relief, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. You did it," Rylix said, her voice shaky but filled with admiration. Ulvex allowed himself a small smile, though his eyes remained cautious. This was just one layer of their defense. "I have no doubt there are more. We must remain vigilant." As the group regrouped, the central console lit up again. This time, the voice was softer, almost conversational. "Welcome, travelers. You have passed the first test. Proceed if you dare, but know that Earth's secrets come at a price." The students stared at the console, the weight of the message settling over them like a shroud. Whatever lay ahead was bound to challenge them even further. The dimly lit chamber now felt alive, not just with the eerie glow of ancient technology, but with the heavy presence of something unseen, something watching. The students exchanged uneasy glances as they processed the voice's ominous message. "Proceed if you dare," Tuvok murmured, his scales rippling with unease. "Is it just me, or does this feel like a trap?" Rylix, still clutching her data tablet, shook her head. "It's not a trap. It's a challenge. Humans didn't build these defenses for no reason. There's something here they wanted to protect, something worth risking everything for." Callan, still nursing his bruised pride, let out a snort. Protect? Or to keep others out? Maybe they were just paranoid. Before anyone could respond, the floor beneath them rumbled. The group froze as a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow corridor lined with glowing blue glyphs. Ulvex stepped forward cautiously, his antennae twitching as he studied the symbols. These glyphs, they're ancient Earth language, but not the kind we've seen before. They're warnings. "What kind of warnings?" Colin asked, his voice trembling despite his attempt to sound dismissive. "They speak of trials," Ulvex replied. "Tests of intellect, resilience, and courage. Humans valued these traits deeply. To access whatever lies at the heart of this facility, we must prove ourselves worthy." Tuvok's claws tapped nervously against the metallic floor. "Worthy? We're scholars, not warriors." What if we fail? Then we join the countless others who've tried and disappeared. Rylix said quietly, her gaze fixed on the glowing corridor ahead. Silence fell over the group as the weight of her words sank in. Ulvex straightened, his expression resolute. We didn't come this far to turn back now. Whatever secrets this place holds, they could redefine our understanding of Earth and humanity. We move forward. Reluctantly, the students followed him into the corridor. The air grew colder with every step, and the faint hum of machinery grew louder. The glyphs on the walls pulsed rhythmically, as though they were alive. Does anyone else feel like we're being watched? Relix whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum. You're not imagining it. Tuvok replied, his eyes darting around. There are surveillance nodes embedded in the walls. They're tracking our every move. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. At the center stood a towering structure, a monolithic obelisk covered in the same glowing glyphs. Surrounding it were countless small pedestals, each displaying a holographic image of what appeared to be historical events. What is this place? Colin asked, his bravado slipping entirely. A repository, Ulvex said, his voice tinged with awe. A record of humanity's past. Look at the images. It's their history, preserved here for those who can reach it. The group approached the nearest pedestal cautiously. The hologram displayed a scene of destruction. Cities in flames, skies filled with massive ships, and humans fighting valiantly against an overwhelming force. This was a war, Rylix said, her voice shaking. But not just any war. Look at the humans. They're outnumbered, outgunned, but they're still fighting. They survived, Ulvex said, his antennae twitching as he analyzed the scene. They turned their planet's harsh conditions into strengths. That's why they called Earth a death world. It forged them into something the galaxy couldn't break. As they moved from pedestal to pedestal, the images shifted, telling a story of resilience, ingenuity, and unrelenting determination. The students were captivated, their earlier fears momentarily forgotten. But their fascination was short-lived. The obelisk suddenly began to hum, its glyphs glowing brighter. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, not the cold, mechanical tone from earlier, but something far older, almost human. You seek knowledge of Earth's legacy, the voice said, but knowledge comes at a cost. Are you prepared to face the truth? The students froze, their gazes locked on the obelisk. What truth? Rylix asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The truth of why Earth was abandoned, the voice replied. The truth of what humanity became. The chamber trembled, and a new image appeared above the obelisk. A fleet of massive starships, their designs unmistakably human. But these were no ordinary ships. They radiated a sense of dread, their weapons far beyond anything the students had ever seen. They left Earth, Tuvok murmured, his voice filled with awe and horror. But they didn't leave to escape. They left to conquer. The chamber grew colder, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them. This is why they called Earth a death world, Ulvex said quietly. Not just because of its dangers, but because of what it created. A species that could survive anything and turn the galaxy into its next battlefield. The voice spoke again, its tone final. The path forward is yours to choose. But know this, once you see the truth, there is no turning back. The students looked at one another, their faces a mixture of fear and determination. Whatever lay ahead, it would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. And yet, none of them turned back. The air in the chamber seemed to thicken as the obelisk's glyphs glowed brighter, pulsating like a heartbeat. The voice had gone silent, but its presence lingered, heavy and unyielding. The students stood frozen, their minds racing with the weight of the revelation. Callan, who had been the loudest skeptic, finally broke the silence. A species that turned the galaxy into a battlefield. What kind of legacy is that? Rylix's gaze remained fixed on the obelisk. It's not just about war. It's about survival. Every trial we've seen here, every record, it all shows how humans adapted, how they turned impossible odds into victories. That's their legacy. Before anyone could respond, a low rumble reverberated through the chamber. The pedestals around them dimmed, their holograms vanishing. In their place, faint figures began to materialize, humanoid silhouettes flickering like static. What are those? Tivok asked, his voice trembling. Projections. Rylix guessed, though her tone betrayed her uncertainty. No, Ulvek said, stepping back as the figures grew more distinct. They're sentinels, guardians of this place. The figures solidified, revealing tall, imposing forms clad in armor that seemed to shimmer between metallic and organic. Their faces were obscured by featureless helmets, but their presence exuded an aura of authority and menace. One of the sentinels stepped forward, its movements unnervingly smooth. When it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant, yet unmistakably human. You have entered the sanctum of Earth's memory, it said. Only those deemed worthy may proceed. The trials you face will test your spirit, your intellect, and your unity. Fail, and you will be denied the truth. The students exchanged uneasy glances. Trials. Colin repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. We didn't sign up for this. Rylix squared her shoulders, her earlier fear giving way to determination. We came to learn, to understand. If this is what it takes, then we face the trials. The sentinel tilted its head, as if assessing her resolve. Very well, it said. The first trial begins now. The chamber shifted around them, the walls dissolving into an endless expanse of darkness. A circular platform formed beneath their feet, its edges glowing faintly. The students stood huddled together, their breaths shallow as the sentinel's voice echoed again. The trial of unity. Survive as one, or perish alone. Before they could question what it meant, the darkness around them erupted with movement. Metallic constructs emerged from the void, spindly, insect-like machines with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp limbs. They're attacking, Tivok shouted, his claws instinctively flaring. The machines lunged, their movements swift and precise. The students scattered, each reacting in their own way. Callan swung his tail defensively, knocking one construct away, while Rylix used her data tablet to emit a burst of electromagnetic interference, temporarily disabling another. Stay together, Ulvex yelled, dodging an attack. We can't survive if we're divided. His words struck a chord, and the group began to regroup. Tivok used his sharp claws to hold off the machines while Rylix guided the others to form a defensive circle. Callan, despite his earlier doubts, used his strength to shield the others from incoming attacks. The constructs adapted quickly, their movements becoming more coordinated, but the students, too, began to work as a team, each playing to their strengths. Overload their circuits, Rylix shouted, pointing to the glowing nodes on the constructs' bodies. Following her lead, Tivok and Callan targeted the weak points, while Ulvex used his advanced knowledge of machinery to disable the constructs more efficiently. Slowly but surely, they began to gain the upper hand. After what felt like an eternity, the last construct fell, its red eyes dimming as it collapsed. The platform beneath them steadied, and the sentinel reappeared, its form as imposing as ever. You have passed the trial of unity, it said, but the path ahead will not be so easily conquered. The darkness began to lift, and the chamber's original form returned. The students stood, battered and exhausted, but alive. What's next? Rylix asked, her voice steady despite her weariness. The sentinel didn't answer directly. Instead, it gestured toward the obelisk, which now displayed a new hologram, a human figure standing atop a crumbling world, gazing defiantly at a fleet of alien ships. The truth of Earth's legacy lies within, the sentinel said. But be warned, knowledge changes all who seek it. The students exchanged determined looks. They had come too far to turn back now. The chamber shifted again, this time revealing a grand hall lined with towering statues. Each statue depicted a human figure, their faces etched with determination, sorrow, and resolve. Weapons, tools, and artifacts were carved into their hands, a testament to their roles in Earth's turbulent history. The students entered cautiously, their earlier confidence now tempered with awe. The sentinel from before stood at the center, its glowing eyes fixed on them. "This is the Hall of the Defenders," the sentinel said. "Here, the legacy of humanity's greatest trials and triumphs is preserved. Each figure represents a moment in history when Earth's survival hung by a thread." Relix stepped closer to one of the statues, her eyes tracing the intricate details of a man holding a shattered shield. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They were warriors, thinkers, leaders," the sentinel replied. "Some fought with weapons, others with words or innovation. Together, they ensured humanity's survival." Callan, still skeptical but undeniably intrigued, studied a statue of a woman holding a data tablet. "So, humans aren't just about brute strength," he muttered. "They're thinkers too." "They are whatever the moment requires," the sentinel said, its tone carrying a hint of pride. "That is their greatest strength, their adaptability." As the students moved deeper into the hall, the statues seemed to come alive, their stories playing out in shimmering holograms. They saw humans defending Earth from planetary disasters, outwitting technologically superior enemies, and rebuilding after devastating wars. One story, in particular, captured their attention. It depicted a small human fleet facing a vast alien armada. The odds were impossible, yet the humans fought with unparalleled tenacity. Their ingenuity turned the tide, using tactics the aliens couldn't predict. "They won," Ulvek said, astonished. "How is that possible?" "They turned their weaknesses into strengths," Rylix observed. "Where others would see despair, they found solutions." The sentinel's voice interrupted their thoughts. "The final trial lies ahead. But before you proceed, you must understand one thing." The chamber darkened, and a massive hologram appeared, showing Earth surrounded by a swirling void of stars. "Humanity is not defined by its strength, nor its intellect, but by its spirit," the sentinel said. "A spirit forged through endless trials, each one more harrowing than the last. To face the truth of Earth's legacy is to face that spirit head-on." Tivok's claws flexed nervously. "What does that mean for us?" "It means," the sentinel replied, "you must decide if you are ready to carry this knowledge. For once you know the truth, there is no turning back." The students exchanged uneasy glances. They had come far, but the weight of their journey was beginning to settle on their shoulders. Rylix, ever the leader, stepped forward. "We came here to learn, to understand. Whatever lies ahead, we'll face it together." The sentinel nodded, its glowing eyes flickering. "Then follow me. The truth awaits." The hall's walls began to shift, opening up to reveal a spiral staircase descending into a dark abyss. The students hesitated, but Rylix led the way, her determination unwavering. As they descended, the air grew colder, and the silence became deafening. The sentinel's presence remained steady, a guiding light in the encroaching darkness. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a circular chamber. At its center stood a single pedestal, holding a crystalline orb that pulsed with a soft, golden light. "This is the core of memory," the sentinel said. "It holds the essence of Earth's history, its triumphs and its tragedies. To touch it is to know the truth." Callan stepped back, his eyes wide. "What if we're not ready?" "You must decide for yourselves," the sentinel said. "But know this, truth changes all who seek it. What you learn here will shape your destiny." Rylix approached the pedestal, her heart pounding. She looked back at her companions, each of them reflecting a mix of fear and curiosity. "We've come this far," she said. "We owe it to ourselves to see it through." With a deep breath, she reached out and placed her hand on the orb. As Rylix's hand touched the crystalline orb, a surge of energy coursed through the chamber. The orb glowed brighter, casting shifting shadows across the walls. The students shielded their eyes as the room dissolved around them, replaced by an infinite expanse of stars. They stood suspended in a void, Earth glowing in the distance. Around it, scenes from its history came alive, projected in vivid detail. Each image carried a weight of emotion, hope, despair, triumph, and sacrifice. "This is the legacy of Earth," the Sentinel's voice echoed. "It is not a place of peace, but a crucible. Through fire and adversity, humanity forged its identity. What you see now is the truth that defines them." The first scene showed a prehistoric human fending off a predator with nothing but a sharpened stick. The students flinched at the savagery, but the image shifted quickly, showing the first fire lit in a darkened cave. "They were not the strongest, nor the fastest," the Sentinel narrated, "but they adapted. They persevered." The images moved faster, showing villages turning into cities, explorers charting unknown lands, and inventors crafting machines that defied imagination. Then came scenes of war, destruction, and sorrow, moments where humanity teetered on the brink of annihilation. "Why do they fight so much?" Olvex asked, his voice trembling. "Because conflict is a teacher," the Sentinel replied. "Through every struggle, they grew stronger. Through every loss, they learned resilience." One scene caught Tuvok's attention, a lone astronaut stepping onto the surface of a barren moon. They reached beyond their world. He asked in disbelief. "They are dreamers," the Sentinel said. "The stars were never out of their reach." But the tone shifted. A scene of humans working together to prevent a global catastrophe appeared. Entire nations set aside their differences, uniting against a shared threat. The students saw the raw determination etched on their faces. "They fight, yes," the Sentinel admitted, "but when faced with the impossible, they come together. Their unity is their greatest weapon." Rylix couldn't look away. She saw humans solving problems that seemed unsolvable, standing firm against forces far greater than themselves. She felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Admiration, perhaps, or awe. The void shifted again, this time showing Earth surrounded by alien fleets. But instead of surrendering, humanity stood its ground. Ingenious strategies, impossible inventions, and sheer willpower turned the tide in every battle. "This is why Earth is called a death world," the Sentinel said, its voice resonating deeply. "Not because it breeds killers, but because it breeds survivors." Callan stepped forward, his earlier arrogance gone. "What are we supposed to do with this knowledge?" "Understand it," the Sentinel replied. "Respect it, and perhaps learn from it." The images slowed, finally settling on a single scene, a human child planting a tree in a ruined field. The sapling stood fragile but full of potential, much like humanity itself. "They are not perfect," the Sentinel said, "but their imperfection is their strength. They are flawed, yet they strive. They fall, yet they rise." The orb dimmed, and the students found themselves back in the chamber. The weight of what they had seen hung heavy in the air. "What now?" Rylix asked, her voice quiet but firm. "Now you carry the truth," the Sentinel said. "What you do with it is up to you. But remember, humanity's story is not finished. It is a tale still being written." The students left the chamber in silence, their minds racing with everything they had witnessed. The halls of the archive seemed quieter now, as if even the walls understood the gravity of what had transpired. As they stepped into the light of the surface, Rylix turned to her companions. "We came here thinking we were superior," she said, "but maybe it's time we learned from them instead." Callan nodded, his pride replaced with newfound humility. "They're more than we ever imagined." The group stood together, gazing at the stars, knowing they would never see the galaxy the same way again. And far above, unseen and silent, the Sentinel watched them leave, its glowing eyes dimming as it whispered to itself, "Perhaps, one day, they will understand."